You're probably aware that the forests that we've been looking at Malcolm Knapp Research Forest and in Pacific Spirit Park are in the coastal western hemlock BEC zone, so the temperate rainforest BEC zone that occurs on coastal BC from sea level up to maybe about 1,000 meters elevation. Now we've moved to a different BEC zone. We're actually in the Interior Douglas-Fir BEC zone. The Interior Douglas-Fir BEC zone dominates at low to mid elevations in the southern to central interior of British Columbia, and it transitions if we go higher in elevation, it often transitions to montane spruce, and in areas where there's lower elevation, it can transition into Ponderosa Pine. So those are the zones that it's usually associated with. Here it's a bit funny, we're actually in a transition zone. We're in the wet, warm subzone of the Interior Douglas-Fir, and if we were to drive up the road, maybe 10 kilometers or so, we'd actually be in the dry submaritime subzone of the coastal western hemlock. So this is really a transition zone. And it's funny because the CWH zone that's just up the road is a dry subzone, whereas here it's a wet subzone. But this is actually drier than that CWH zone. Remember that those subzones are just refer to the differences within the zone. So as far as the coastal western hemlock zone goes, the area that we're near is on the dry end of that. And as far as the Interior Douglas-Fir zone goes, the area that we're in is on the very wet end of the Interior Douglas-Fir. But since IDF is much drier on the whole than coastal western hemlock, that's why we can be in a spot here that's called wet. Generally speaking, the IDF has warm, dry summers, a long growing season, and cool winters. As the name would suggest, the Interior Douglas-Fir is the climatic climax species, and you'll typically find that tree in most forests in this zone, or just about all forests in this zone. Interior Douglas-Fir is a different variety than coastal Douglas-Fir, so you may recall that coastal Douglas-Fir is very shade intolerant and needs lots of light and a big opening to be able to regenerate. Interior Douglas-Fir is a little bit different. It's moderately shade tolerant. So not extremely shade tolerant, but moderately shade tolerant. So we can use different silvicultural systems here and still get regeneration of Interior Douglas-Fir. Clear cuts are also still very widely used, but a few different silvicultural systems can still be used here to regenerate Interior Douglas-Fir. Other tree species that are really important, lodgepole pine is pretty common throughout the IDF. At higher elevation ranges, as we start to approach the boundary with the montane spruce, we'll get what sometimes is called interior spruce or hybrid spruce. It's a hybrid between white spruce and Engelmann spruce. And then occasionally, I'm in kind of a funny spot here, that really big tree behind me, that big tall tree, is actually a Ponderosa pine. We don't often get Ponderosa pines in this area per se, but as I did say, in the Fraser Valley, we often will have the Ponderosa pine zone will occur at a lower elevation than the Interior Douglas-Fir zone. So at that boundary, we can get a little bit of mixing. And because we're on the very wet end of Interior Douglas-Fir, and we're really kind of in a transitional zone between coastal western hemlock and Interior Douglas-Fir, we get a few of those species as well. In particular, in some of these wetter areas, we'll find a fair amount of western red cedar, which we don't find throughout the Interior Douglas-Fir zone. You've probably noticed that I'm not in a forest right now. I'm actually standing in a grassland. There are scattered grasslands through the Interior Douglas-Fir zone. They're usually caused by topography or edaphic conditions, so the soil conditions, or fire history. Areas that burn more frequently may be maintained as grassland. And in particular, indigenous peoples have in the past and currently use fire to help manage the landscape. And by burning, they would promote some areas to stay in grassland, which might help grow plants that are important for food or medicine, or also areas like this are good browsing areas for deer, for example, so to help manage wild game. Those might be some of the reasons why people had managed for these grasslands in the past. And this particular one in the Skagit Provincial Park, they're trying to maintain. I know that they do controlled burning here at times, and I think they're doing a little bit of restoration. There's a number of Ponderosa pines behind me, and I see they've been all flagged, so I think they might be trying to track or do something with those trees. Some of the plants I recognize here include tall Oregon grape, silky lupin, yarrow, and leafy aster.